What happens when an undercover CEO steps into his own store, only to discover that one of his hardest working employees is barely surviving on their paycheck? Daniel Hayes sat in his office, flipping through yet another complaint. It wasn't about customer service or product quality. It was about his employees. He read the words again. "I work full-time, but my paycheck barely covers my bills. I don't know how much longer I can do this." Daniel frowned. His company, Hayesmart, had built a reputation on fair wages and positive workplace culture. He prided himself on offering above-average pay, yet here was proof that something was deeply wrong. He'd asked his regional managers for answers, but they insisted everything was fine. The reports showed stable staff retention and happy employees, but Daniel had learned long ago that numbers didn't always tell the full story. "There's only one way to find out," he muttered to himself. 2 days later, Daniel walked into one of his busiest stores, not as the CEO, but as Dave, a new trainee cashier. His tailored suit was replaced with worn-out jeans, a faded polo shirt, and a name tag that barely clung to his shirt. His hair was tousled, and he wore a pair of thick-rimmed glasses to complete the disguise. The store bustled with life, customers filling carts, cashiers scanning items, and employees darting through aisles. But there was no energy, no warmth. The workers looked drained, moving robotically, their faces tired. "Hey, new guy!" a sharp voice barked. Daniel turned to see a man in his early 40s, Rick, the assistant manager. His presence seemed to cast a shadow over the room. "Get behind register 4, Rick ordered. "Lisa will show you what to do. Don't mess it up." Without another word, Rick stormed off, muttering under his breath. Lisa, a soft-spoken woman in her 30s, greeted Daniel with a tired smile. Her uniform was neat, but the deep circles under her eyes betrayed her exhaustion. "Don't worry," she said quietly. "It's not that bad, unless Rick's around." As Daniel started his training, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in the air. Employees kept their heads down, avoiding eye contact with Rick whenever he passed. Whispers filled the gaps between beeping scanners, low conversations about cut hours, smaller paychecks, and missing bonuses. By his lunch break, Daniel was already concerned, but it wasn't until later that afternoon that he realized just how serious things really were. Near the end of his shift, Daniel was bagging groceries when he overheard a conversation near the break room. I just can't," a woman's voice said shakily. Curious, Daniel turned his head slightly and saw Megan, a cashier he'd noticed earlier, hardworking, polite, and always moving fast. Her face was pale, her fingers gripping a crumpled piece of paper. "I'm short again this month," Megan whispered to a co-worker. "I don't know how I'm going to pay rent. I skipped groceries last week just to keep the lights on." Her voice broke slightly. "I don't know what else to do." Daniel's stomach tightened. He watched as Megan quietly folded the paper, her paycheck stub, and stuffed it into her pocket. She plastered on a smile and returned to her register, greeting the next customer like nothing had happened. Daniel stood frozen. His heart sank. Something was terribly wrong in his company, and he wasn't leaving until he found out what. Daniel arrived for his second day as Dave, with a sinking feeling in his chest. The image of Megan clutching her paycheck stub refused to leave his mind. He had spent the night replaying her words. "I skipped groceries last week just to keep the lights on." And each time, the guilt weighed heavier. He had built Hayesmart to be a company that treated its employees well. If people like Megan were struggling despite working hard, something was deeply broken, and Daniel was determined to find out what. The break room incident midway. Through his shift, Daniel noticed Megan sitting alone in the break room. Her lunch, a single granola bar and a bottle of water, sat untouched beside her. She stared at her phone, her thumb hovering over the screen. Her eyes were red. "Everything okay?" Daniel asked cautiously as he stepped inside. Megan jumped slightly, then wiped her face with the back of her sleeve. Yeah, I'm fine," she muttered. She tucked her phone away like she'd been caught doing something wrong. "Are you sure?" Daniel pressed gently. Megan tried to smile, but her eyes betrayed her. Her voice wavered. "I was checking my bank account." She gave a forced laugh. "It's kind of depressing." "Yeah?" Daniel said carefully. "Money's tight?" Megan hesitated. Then, maybe because she didn't see Dave as a threat, she exhaled. "I'm working 6 days a week, but my check barely gets me through the month." She gave a dry laugh. "Rent's gone up, groceries cost more, and Rick's been cutting hours lately. Says it's to keep the store profitable." She paused. "I'm still behind." "Wait," Daniel said, frowning. "Rick's cutting your hours?" Megan nodded bitterly. "Yeah, not just me. Lots of people. He changes the schedule last minute, or asks us to clock out early but keep working. Says he's helping the company by lowering costs." She scoffed. "Meanwhile, I'm barely scraping by." Daniel's blood ran cold. Clocking out early but staying to finish work. That was not only unethical, it was illegal. "I'm sorry," Megan added quickly. "I shouldn't be talking about this. I can't afford to get on Rick's bad side." Her voice dropped. "He's threatened to cut more of my shifts if I complain." Daniel felt his fists clench beneath the table. "You're not in the wrong," he said quietly. "None of you are." Megan gave a hollow smile. "Doesn't really matter. We just deal with it." Later that afternoon, Daniel saw Rick in action, and it was worse than he imagined. The lunch rush had just ended, and Megan was restocking shelves in aisle 4. She moved quickly, balancing armfuls of canned goods. "Megan!" Rick's voice thundered from the front of the store. Megan flinched, nearly dropping a can. "Yes?" she called back. Rick stormed over. "Why are you still here? You were supposed to clock out 20 minutes ago." "I'm finishing this shelf," Megan said, forcing calm into her voice. "No," Rick snapped. "You're off the clock now. Get out." Megan blinked. "But I just need 5 more minutes to finish," Rick sneered. "You want to work for free? Go ahead." His tone turned cruel. "Or maybe you'd rather I cut your hours next week instead." Megan's face paled. Wordlessly, she set down the cans and walked away. Daniel's chest burned with anger. He's bullying them into working for free. Moments later, Rick smirked to himself and muttered, "Bunch of idiots," before heading to his office. Daniel had seen enough. That evening, after closing, Daniel waited for Rick to leave. Once the store was empty, he unlocked the manager's office using the spare key behind the desk. He sat at Rick's computer and opened the payroll system. His heart sank. Dozens of employees' records showed hours mysteriously cut short, not because they didn't work, but because they had been forced to clock out early. Megan's name appeared multiple times. In one particularly bad week, Megan's record showed she'd worked 31 hours, yet had been paid for 24. 7 hours gone. A whole day's pay vanished. Daniel stared at the screen, stunned. This wasn't an accident. Rick was systematically exploiting his staff to manipulate payroll and reduce costs. Worse yet, Daniel realized Rick had been rewarded for improving store performance. Bonuses, praise from upper management, all earned by cheating his employees. Daniel's heart pounded. Megan, and so many others, had been suffering so Rick could look good. He shut off the computer, locked the office, and walked out into the dark parking lot. His mind swirled with anger and guilt. Megan's exhausted face, her skipped meals, her whisper about choosing between rent and groceries. He couldn't let this continue. Tomorrow, Rick wouldn't just be fired. He was going to answer for every dollar stolen. The following morning, Daniel arrived at the store with one goal. Rick's reign of exploitation was about to end. But first, Daniel needed proof, hard evidence. He couldn't just fire Rick without making things right for Megan and every other employee who'd suffered under his manipulations. By midday, the store was bustling. Daniel worked quietly behind Register 4, watching Rick hover near the employees like a vulture. Rick barked orders between sarcastic jabs, mocking cashiers for moving too slow, accusing stock clerks of slacking off, and ensuring everyone was on edge. But what happened next pushed Daniel past his breaking point. Megan, pale-faced and exhausted, was juggling 2 customers at her register. One woman dug through her purse for loose change, while another man impatiently tapped his foot behind her. Megan apologized for the delay, keeping her voice calm despite her obvious stress. "Come on," Rick's voice bellowed from behind her. "If you spent less time chatting and more time scanning, you might actually finish a line." "I'm doing my best," Megan said quietly. "Your best isn't good enough," Rick barked. He marched to her station and grabbed the half-scanned items. "Go. Clock out, now!" "But," Megan tried to protest. "My shift isn't over." "I don't care," Rick snapped. "You've wasted enough time already." Humiliated and close to tears, Megan stepped back from her register and started toward the break room. That's when Rick muttered just loud enough for everyone to hear. "No wonder she's always broke. She's barely worth what we pay her." Daniel's hand clenched around his scanner. His pulse thundered in his ears. He'd seen enough. Daniel followed Rick into his office. The door had barely closed when Daniel's voice cut through the air. "We need to talk." Rick spun around, eyebrows raised. "What's your problem, new guy?" He scoffed, dropping into his chair. "Megan's lucky I even keep her on." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Lucky? You've been stealing her hours, cutting shifts, making her work off the clock." Rick grinned smugly. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Actually," Daniel said slowly, "I do." He stepped forward, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out his CEO badge and placed it on Rick's desk. "I'm Daniel Hayes." Rick's smile vanished, his face drained of color. "Whoa, wait. You're joking." "I'm not." Daniel's voice was ice cold. "I've been here undercover, and I saw everything." Rick opened his mouth to speak, but Daniel cut him off. "I saw you intimidate Megan into clocking out early. I heard you threaten employees to keep quiet about it. I've seen payroll records. Hours vanished so you could make your numbers look better." Daniel's voice rose. "You stole from your own staff." Rick's face twisted in anger. "Look, I was just saving this store. Do you know how hard it is to hit profit targets? These people complain about being broke, but maybe if they worked harder..." "Enough." Daniel's voice shook. "I built this company to support hardworking people. Employees like Megan are the reason this business survives, not cowards like you who cheat and bully." "You can't fire me," Rick shot back. "I've been here for years." Daniel's gaze sharpened. "You're not just fired. I'm reporting you to corporate for wage theft, and I'm making sure Megan and every employee you've exploited gets back every dollar they're owed." "You can't prove anything," Rick sneered. "You've got no proof." Daniel reached into his pocket and tossed a USB drive onto the desk. "This says otherwise." Rick's face paled. He knew he was finished. "Get your things," Daniel said quietly, "and get out." A promise to Megan. With Rick gone, Daniel found Megan in the break room. She was sitting alone, shoulders slumped, her head resting in her hands. "Hey," Daniel said softly as he approached. Megan wiped her eyes quickly. "Sorry," she muttered. "I'll get back to work." "You don't have to." Daniel sat across from her. "I know everything, Megan." Her expression shifted from confusion to fear. I didn't mean to cause problems," she stammered. "I know Rick's tough, but..." "You didn't cause problems," Daniel interrupted. "Rick did, and he's gone." Megan's eyes widened. "Gone? I fired him," Daniel said firmly. "He's been stealing from you, from a lot of employees, forcing people to work off the clock, cutting hours, threatening you all. It's over." Megan's face crumpled as relief overtook her. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Daniel said. "But you do deserve an apology, and you're going to get every dollar Rick stole from you." "Thank you," Megan whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't think anyone cared." Daniel smiled softly. I care, and I should have known sooner. He paused, then added, Megan, you've kept this place running. I want you to step up as assistant manager. The store, the employees, they need someone they can trust. Megan's breath caught. Me? You've been leading this place for months without the title, Daniel said. It's time you get the recognition you deserve. For a moment, Megan just stared at him. Then she smiled, a real smile, one Daniel hadn't seen on her face before. I won't let you down, she said firmly. I know, Daniel replied. That's why I picked you. The morning after Rick's firing, Daniel returned to the store, this time as himself. No disguise, no fake name tag. He wore his usual business attire, and his CEO badge gleamed on his chest. The employees, still adjusting to the previous day's events, exchanged whispers as he walked through the aisles. Daniel knew what they were thinking. Is this just another corporate stunt? He stepped to the front of the store and raised his voice. Can I get everyone's attention, please? Employees slowly gathered, forming a loose circle around him. Their faces were a mix of uncertainty and hope. Megan stood near the front, her expression unreadable. I know things have been rough here, Daniel began. And I know some of you are still wondering if things will really change. I'm here to tell you that they will, starting today. He paused, meeting their eyes. First, every employee who lost wages under Rick's manipulation will be paid back in full, no exceptions. A ripple of surprise passed through the crowd. Megan's eyes widened. Second, Daniel continued, we're putting an end to the toxic work culture that's been allowed to fester here. No more intimidation, no more unpaid overtime, no more being treated like you don't matter. That ends now. Several employees nodded slowly. A few exchanged hopeful glances. Lastly, Daniel said, turning toward Megan, I want to formally introduce your new assistant manager. Megan's eyes widened again. Megan has kept this store running, even without the title. Her dedication, patience, and hard work have held this team together. From today forward, she'll be stepping into a leadership role. I know she's the right person to help guide this store back to where it should be. A moment of silence followed. Then, the employees erupted into applause. Megan's face flushed as her co-workers cheered. Some clapped her on the back, while others gave her genuine smiles of support. Thank you, Megan said softly, still stunned. I'll do my best. You already have, Daniel said. Turning things around, over the next week, Daniel remained at the store, working alongside his employees. He wasn't there to micromanage. He was there to listen. What do you need to make this place better? He asked cashier Maya during her break. Honestly, Maya shrugged. Schedules that don't change last minute would be a start. Daniel made a note of it. We need more staff during the afternoon rush, one stock clerk suggested. We're always drowning in carts. Got it, Daniel replied. Little by little, Daniel pieced together what the employees really needed. Within days, he had implemented key changes. Fair scheduling, no more last-minute cuts to reduce payroll, better staffing. Extra employees were brought in during peak hours to ease the workload. Mandatory break enforcement. No more employees skipping lunch just to keep up. Employee hotline. Staff could now report concerns directly to Daniel's office without fear of retaliation. The difference was noticeable. Employees moved faster, not out of fear, but with purpose. Customers seemed happier, and the entire store felt lighter. But the most powerful change came from Megan. One afternoon, Megan was managing the front registers when a frustrated customer started berating a young cashier named Kevin. The man slammed his hand on the counter, yelling about an expired coupon and demanding a manager. Kevin's face turned pale, his hands trembling as he fumbled with the scanner. I said I want a manager, the customer snapped. Before Daniel could intervene, Megan stepped in. Sir, Megan said calmly, I understand you're upset. Let me help you. You, the customer scoffed. I doubt you know what you're doing any better than he does. Megan didn't flinch. I understand you're frustrated, but I won't let you speak to my employee like that. Her voice was steady but firm. We'll fix the issue, but calmly, please. The man muttered something under his breath but eventually relented. Megan corrected the error and thanked the man for his patience. Kevin stared at her like she'd just defused a bomb. How did you do that? He asked quietly once the customer left. Megan smiled. I just remembered how it felt to be the one getting yelled at. On his last day at the store, Daniel stood, quietly near the front, watching as Megan walked the floor, checking on employees, helping restock shelves, and taking the time to greet customers personally. He watched as Maya laughed with a customer while scanning items. He saw Kevin chatting comfortably with a coworker, no longer timid or afraid. And finally, he saw Megan helping an elderly woman with her groceries. The same woman Rick had once humiliated. Megan carefully packed her bags and even offered to help her to her car. The woman smiled warmly. You're always so kind, she said. It's nice to know someone here really cares. We all care, Megan replied. And if anyone tells you otherwise, you come straight to me. From across the store, Daniel smiled. This was the company he'd always envisioned, one where people felt valued, respected, and supported. He walked quietly out the front doors, leaving the store and its people in Megan's capable hands.